21151852CA.
Okay, we're back on record. Mr. Lee, are we ready for your witness?
Ready, Judge.
Very good.
I'll stand that word.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Watch out for the step there.
Hi.
Hi.
Would you state and spell your full name, please?
Todd Nerick,
Could you spell it for us?
Neyrinck.
Thank you.
You're
Have
welcome.
a seat and talk right up to that microphone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
Your Honor, I would object as far as Mr. Nerick's testimonies. I'm not quite sure what he's going to be testifying to, but this is the criminal contempt hearing of Dale Warner. Dale Warner is not testifying on his own behalf. So far, the evidence is uncontroverted. I'm unsure how Mr. Nerick is going to testify as to what Dale Warner did or did not do. If he's going to be used to impeach Mr. Bach or Mr. Dempsey's testimony, that would be one thing, but I'm not sure how he can testify on behalf of Dale Warner.
All right, a little bit of a preview on the relevance of this witness.
Glad to, Your Honor. Mr. Nerick was at the very beginning of the creation of DDW Investments. He has been involved in multiple capacities, but primarily working in the office and as a dispatcher for DDW Investments, testified to by Mr. Bach. He also is infinitely familiar with the exhibit that's number 1. He was involved with the customers at DDW Investments, is familiar with the work that Mr. Bach performed within DDW Investments as the accountant. And Mr. Nerick was aware of creation of DDW Transportation and was there at the time that DDW Transportation was created. He was a longstanding employee of the Warners, day-to-day contact with Deanne Warner concerning the business entities and particularly DDW Investments, and was terminated by Dee Warner. Now works for Laidlaw, and he can testify as to what his position is at Laidlaw, but is very intimately familiar with the businesses and the business of DDW Investments and how it was operated and how things got done. So that would be reported testimony, which would be not only to talk about DDW Investments, but also to impeach Mr. Bach.
To impeach what?
Mr. Bach.
Okay. Anything else? Any other argument?
I guess I'll listen to his testimony to the extent it is outside the scope of attempting to impeach or contradict Mr. Bach's testimony, then I'm going to object.
Your Honor, I'd like to present you with something.
Okay, you'll have to.
Okay, we'll
yeah,
wait till
sorry.
we're done. Calm down.
You're, you're just the witness for today.
Okay.
I appreciate you coming. The structure of our hearing under the
I
court
can't run
rules.
this.
No, I can't even really either. Mr. Leach got to ask all the questions.
Okay.
For now. Go ahead.
Mr. Derrick, will you state your name for the record and spell it as the court indicated and tell us how old you are and where you reside?
I'm 55 years old. Todd Nerick. Neyrinck, I believe is how it's spelled.
And who do you work for?
I work for Laidlaw Carriers, Bulk USA.
What is your job at Laidlaw Carriers?
Division manager.
And what does that entail?
It means moving freight, brokering loads, finding new business, growing the business, exploring new opportunities.
Did you know Dee Warner?
Yes,
How did you know her?
Friend of mine, Mark Barrett, worked for Dale and D, and I was laid off from my previous job. And I worked for them in the winter of 2006, hauling seed, just part-time.
And did that part-time job turn into a full-time job?
It did in 2007. I was ready to make a change, and the business atmosphere of what I did previously changed. And I was ready to move on to something different. I wanted to go back to kind of the roots of where I grew up in the trucking business. And that's what I did.
Okay. So you weren't there at the very beginning of DDW Investments?
Yes, I was.
You were, okay.
Yes.
Were you involved in helping the Warners form the company?
The business was formed previous to my coming there in 2006. BDW Investments was formed. Dale and D were going to buy a feed store. They were going to have a contract with Purina, and they inquired on purchasing some property nearby and putting up a feed and something similar to what Cutler
Mayor,
Dickerson
I'm
did.
gonna object, and my grounds would be,
What
unless
is it,
you
the
can,
truth? You don't want to hear it?
Okay, I'll have to settle the objection before we can continue with your testimony. Just wait.
I don't know if this is his firsthand knowledge or if this is hearsay. He hasn't indicated that this is what he has observed, that he has heard from a party, or whether this is hearsay. So that's my objection, Your Honor.
First-hand knowledge.
Okay, if you could clarify, please, because my understanding from your testimony was that you said that you weren't there when DDW was
I
formed.
was there part-time, and I had heard all about it from Dee. I was a fairly close confidant of hers in the time that I worked there, Your Honor.
So this was information that you got from D. Warner.
That's, yeah. We're gonna open a feed store, and that's why DDW Investments was formed.
Any further objections? You may continue.
Were you there when they prepared the operating agreements for the company?
No, I didn't see any of that.
Okay. And so what was your capacity when you worked at DDW Investments?
We started off working, the trucks were leased under Warag Farms to Autumn Transport, doing some kind of not great work with the trucks pulling their trailers. And I kept preaching to both Dee and Dale both that we could do this on our own. I had some contacts previously from where I grew up in our business and family business. And I said, I can do this myself. We don't need these people. And that's how we got started in it.
And you were able to convince Dale and Dee to get into the trucking business?
I had a harder time convincing Dee to do it.
Okay. And eventually they got into the business, right?
Yes.
Okay. And did they own their own trucks and trailers?
We had one trailer that was more or less a farm trailer, and we had a couple trucks.
So in terms of DDW Investments, it was basically just the business. They didn't own anything. That was, the trucks and trailers were owned by another company.
True.
And would the name Cedar Creek mean anything to you?
That Cedar Creek, after advice of probably Doug Hartong or somebody through the years, advised them to separate.
Objection, Your Honor. That is hearsay.
No, it's not. It's the truth. Call Doug up himself.
Would you like to
He's close
respond?
by.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Nair, hang on.
No, I'll move on.
Okay.
Mr. Nyrick, did you, the trucks were owned by Cedar Creek, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, once we got established more.
Okay, and your job in the office every day, strike that. How often would you work? Every day?
Pretty much every day.
Okay. You lived in close proximity to
Yes.
where the office
Yes.
was? Okay. Did Dee and Warner trust you basically to run the dispatch and,
Yes,
how many customers of DDW Investments are?
There's probably 5 to 8 core customers, people that we work for every week. Then there's another 5 to 10 customers that are brokers that they are larger companies. And if you yourself had a truck and called them, okay, I've got a truck here, can I do a load for you? You've got freight. It's larger companies that broker stuff out like that.
Okay. And how does it work with the, your job and the office personnel? Somebody contacts DDW Investments, they need somebody to move some freight.
As a rule, I mean, it's relationships, you know, and building a good name with customers and having an established record of doing a decent job for people.
Okay. Were you familiar with the customers of DDW Investments?
Yes,
Sharon, I'm going to approach you.
You may.
Todd, I'm showing you what's been admitted as Exhibit 1, which is purported to be a list of names, addresses, phone numbers of people who, or entities that have done business with DDW Investments. You recognize any of the names on there?
yeah. Yeah,
Would you recognize that as a proprietary list? In other words, an asset of the company? Or was it just a list of names?
it's a list of names right here, but for these names on here, you have to have a relationship with these people to do any business with them.
Are any of those competitors by chance?
There's a few people that are customers now of Laidlaw's, and they're customers. I mean, most of these people, you're not an exclusive carrier for, you know.
So when you say you're not an exclusive carrier, does that mean that there are other
Yes.
competitors in the industry and anybody can hire whoever they want?
Yeah, it's, you know, price, volume, and all that.
I was gonna say, what dictates whether somebody would hire a particular firm or another?
If they like working with somebody, a lot of it is whether or not they trust the person to move their product, that they're on time, and everything else.
Okay. Did you have a working relationship with Deanne Warner?
Yes,
And how long did you work with her?
from when I worked there part-time all the way through April 24th of 2021.
Okay. And what were some of the things that you would do with her on a given day?
We would talk about driver issues or, you know, strategize sometimes about stuff that, you know, maybe we need to try something different or something like that.
Would you ever work with Zach back in the office?
In the 2 years previous to Dee's disappearance, very little. Zach wasn't around there very much.
How about before that?
He was there more and put more time into it.
Okay. So if he testified that he worked there from the time he was in high school, 2007, 8, 9 to 2014, you wouldn't dispute that, right?
Correct. I mean, he worked there, he would come and mow the grass, he would do whatever his mom needed, he just, you know.
And at some point in time, he left working at DDW Investments?
Yeah, he went and was selling more real estate, and I think his mom, when he came back in 2016 or 17, his mom needed a confidant there in the office more than anything.
Okay.
She needed a shoulder that she could depend on.
Okay, and who else worked in the office besides Zach and Dee?
Stephanie Volke worked there.
Okay, anybody else?
Started in July of 16.
Anybody else?
Previous to 2016?
Yeah.
There's Diane Shook worked there. Nicole Miller, Nikki Seeley, Stacy Fuller, there's Jackie Bauer.
Okay.
There's been a number of people that worked there previous.
Were you involved at all in doing any of the invoicing with any of the customers?
I oversaw it after it was invoiced, just to make sure there weren't any errors and that it went to the proper place for payment.
Would there ever be a time from time to time where you would go to D and say there's a mistake here, or there's a problem?
Yeah, I would write it and correct it, and I would also write down what we did every week.
Were you at all involved in paying any of the expenses for DDW investments?
No,
Who primarily did that?
that was usually Zach.
Okay.
And at times Dee would just yell at Zach for not paying something on time.
Are you at all familiar with any of the other Warner entities that were run out of that office?
The farm was there and the farm services.
Were you at all involved with those companies?
Very little. I would help haul in hydrous tanks or something if they needed it or whatever. Anything that needed to be done, I would help them with.
Okay. Did you ever work with Dale Warner?
Yeah,
In what capacity would you work?
I would help them do whatever. If they were farming and needed help moving or something like that, I would help them. Or hauling grain in the fall, I would help them.
Okay. As you recall, was Dale ever involved in DDW investments in any of the trucking business?
He oversaw, like when we buy equipment and stuff, and, you know, if he saw something that wasn't, you know, working and, or something like that, mostly he oversaw the maintenance and that kind of thing.
So I gathered from your testimony that Deanne Warner ran the business.
Well, I ran more or less. I mean, I dealt with the customers, the drivers, and pretty much the issues that came up day to day.
Have you ever worked with Mark Weisberg?
Yeah, Mark started working there in April of 14.
Okay. And what, as you know, was Mr. Weisberg's role there?
He was a CFO, whatever the hell you call it. He came in there right at the time when Dee had a disagreement with Stacy Fuller, who had worked there for probably 5 years. And Mark came in there and Dee needed somebody right away, and she hired him right on the spot. Can you start next week or tomorrow?
Okay.
She didn't really do any sort of background check on him or anything. She hired him on the spot, and Mark was there and did what she needed done.
Okay. And what kinds of things would Mark Weisberg do that you could personally observe?
Bookkeeping and that kind of stuff. And at the time they were involved in buying that goddamn Russell
Can you please
farm.
refrain
Oh,
from using?
I'm sorry. There's a lot worse I should say about that, but that's, I apologize.
Apology accepted.
But that, and he helped with that. It just,
Did
Your Honor, I didn't hear the full answer of what was being purchased that you should. I didn't hear that.
you repeat your answer?
the DeRussell farm up in Manchester.
Thank you.
Okay. So Mr. Weisberg was primarily responsible for assisting Dee in running some of the business operation.
Well, the finance part of it, I guess, and it was an overwhelming process, that whole thing. It was overwhelming from my outside looking in financially and everything else at the time.
Did you know that DDW Investments LLC was in debt to the IRS?
I did not know that. I knew that there were some tax issues, but it was around the first week of April in 2021, Dee said to me, says, we have the taxes all paid. We can go forward right now, but the taxes are all paid.
Okay.
She told that to me.
Did you come to find out later that that wasn't true?
Yes,
And why would you have known that?
because Mark they had gotten notices in the mail, registered letters. I've gotten them. I've been arguing with the IRS most of my adult life, and I know what a registered letter from the IRS means. It's not good.
And as it relates to DDW Investments,
That payroll taxes were not paid.
Did you ever discuss that with Zach Bach or anyone else in the office?
No,
Mr. Nerick, you, at some point in time, were you terminated by D. Warner?
I wasn't terminated by D. Warner. I was terminated by Judge Saul.
Okay. And you, I think you're referring to, are you referring to the January 2022 order that?
Yes,
Okay, so.
that was when I was officially terminated from DDW Investments.
Got it, okay. So before that, though, you performed your role and job in the office like we had
Yeah.
talked about.
Yep,
And you were in charge of running the trucking operation?
yes.
Okay, because you
Your Honor,
were,
I'm going to object. I'm not sure how any of this is relevant.
well, I think it's very relevant. It's explaining his version of the facts, which,
I mean, so
Okay.
far we've had 40 minutes of testimony that has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, the five areas in the motion are quite clear about the diversion from the DDW bank account, the sale of assets, the SBA loan to Warag, the new Warag bank account, and the diversion of the Warag payments. This has nothing to do with that. Doesn't speak to any of those issues.
so we're gonna talk about DDW transportation, right? So if I may continue.
You can continue as long as you bring it into what we're here to talk about today.
Well, I think DPW transportation is one of those issues. It's listed as item number 1.
Do you intend to show that this gentleman was responsible for diversion of
No.
funds?
No,
Or what is
I'm gonna
the,
ask him whether he knew whether or not there was any diversion and how the company was set up.
How can you know if there's a version that happened after he was terminated?
It didn't. Never, there was no diversion, but I'm gonna ask.
well, I think it looks like we're gonna need to lay a little bit more foundation about how he would have that knowledge.
That's fine. Mr. Merrick, I believe you testified that you learned that Dee Ann Warner disappeared in April of 2021. Is that true?
Yes,
What happened with the trucking business after she disappeared?
kept right on work.
And at that point, I believe you testified that you learned that there was some IRS debt.
Yes,
And I believe you testified that it was payroll taxes to the IRS related to DDW investments. Okay. At some point in time, were you around when a company called DDW Transportation was formed?
yeah.
You know anything about that company?
Only thing was I knew that Jim Duzema, a longtime attorney for both Dale and Dee, who helped them go through various issues, advised the formation of DDW Transportation.
I'm gonna object to this knowledge as hearsay. I haven't heard that this is personal knowledge he gained from parties.
Would you like to respond?
Sure. Were you around when, or were you available when Mr. Duzema talked to?
I wasn't there, but I had, knowledge of conversation that Dale and Mark were having, and they said that we were gonna have to form another company because of this IRS debt.
Okay. So did you ever have conversations with Jim Duzema over the years?
No.
How did you know that he was the attorney that Dale and Dee would use? To
I
do
heard
this work?
Jim Duzema over many issues that they had over the years.
Okay. And you knew him to be their corporate attorney,
Yes,
but you personally have never met him? Okay. You never called him, you never had a conversation?
no,
All right, so DDW Transportation is set up. Are you aware of how it was set up? Or for what its intended purposes were, other than what you just testified, which was to deal with the tax issues
deal with the tax issue was the only reason.
of DDW investments?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm still objecting because that was based upon what he said, the information from the attorney, and the information wasn't direct, he never spoke.
Response?
I'll just rephrase the question.
All right, it is sustained, it is hearsay evidence. It's already in the record, of course, but I will recognize that it is secondhand information. Go ahead.
Mr. Nerick, at some point in time, DDW Transportation is operating as an entity, correct? Okay. Were you there while the corporation was operating?
Yeah,
You know when the corporation was formed?
it's August of 21.
Okay. And your testimony was that it was to deal with the tax issues, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So do you know who owned DDW Investments?
Dale Warner.
Was it Dale Warner exclusively?
Objection, it's speculation. There's been no foundation laid as to how he knows who owns what.
Mr. Nerick, how would you know that Dale Warner was the only person that was listed as an owner?
That's all. That's what I know.
Did you have any conversations with Mark Weisberg or anyone else to learn
That
that?
they formed this other company and Dale was the only one there to form. That's,
Okay. Do you know why Deanne Warner was not listed on the DDW Transportation
She wasn't
LLC Articles of Incorporation?
she was not there.
Why was she not there?
She disappeared. I
Okay.
pray to God she's someplace still here.
Okay. And at this point in time, DDW Transportation is operating. And what was the purpose as you learned? What were they doing? Were they operating as a trucking company?
Operating as a trucking company.
Okay. Did you work for them or did you continue to work for DDW?
I worked for DDW Transportation.
Okay. So you moved over from DDW Investments LLC to DDW Transportation.
Yes,
Objection, that mischaracterizes his testimony, he just said he did the same thing.
We are welcome to cross-examine
Okay.
if you wish. Your next question?
Yes. Mr. Nerick, I'm sorry, maybe I'm just a little fuzzy, but okay. You testified that in August 2021, DDW Transportation, as you knew, was created, yes?
yes,
Okay. You then transferred over from DDW Investments LLC to DDW Transportation LLC, is that true?
yes,
Okay. So was your paychecks then coming from DDW Transportation?
yes, eventually they were.
Okay. Do you know whether or not Mr. Warner opened a bank account in August of 2021?
I don't know that he opened a bank account at that time.
Okay. At some point in time, he opened a bank account because you were receiving checks, right?
Yes,
Do you know whether or not expenses were paid out of DDW Transportation?
I would hope so. Oh, I'm sorry, I would hope so.
Your Honor, is that a no? You didn't say that?
Yes, they were.
Is DDW Investments LLC still alive as a company today?
Yes,
Was never sold, correct?
correct,
It never lost any of its assets, is that true?
true.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. How would he have any idea he doesn't work there anymore? If it's still alive, how can he say never?
How would you know that, sir?
I've been around there ever since whenever. It just, I would have to go through, I'm not sure what your name is, and look through the titles for the insurance to see how everything was titled. Every title, everything that was there for insurance purposes and everything, I looked at to make sure it was insured properly.
I'm still renewing my objection.
Well, you're welcome to cross-examine him. I would agree with you, but I think it goes to the weight of the testimony, not necessarily the admissibility.
Great judge. Now, Mr. Nerick, at some point in time, DDW Transportation's operating in, what was your role with DDW Transportation?
The same thing as I,
Ask and answer. 3 times, actually.
And
Sustained. Let's have another question.
did you deal with the customers the same way you did with DDW Investments?
yes,
Did you work with the billings and deal with the invoices and do all the stuff that you were doing with DDW Transportation?
yes,
Were any of the customers different from DDW Investments to DDW Transportation?
no,
And so, as you know, at some point in time, you were terminated.
From DDW Investments, yes.
Are you aware that in September of 2021, this court appointed a conservator?
Yes.
You know who the conservator was?
Russ Dempsey.
Were you ever contacted by Russ Dempsey as one of the people working for DDW Investments or DDW Transportation?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And where did you meet him?
I did not meet him.
Okay. Did you talk to him?
Yes, Mr. Dempsey phoned me.
And what, if anything, was said to him?
Mr. Dempsey told me
Objection to
after,
hearsay.
Mr. Dempsey,
Response?
Mr. Dempsey testified in court. I'm just curious about what their conversation was in terms of why he was contacting him.
Doesn't matter if you're testifying in court.
It is hearsay. Is there any other reason that you would have an exception to the hearsay rule on this?
Goes to the way that the testimony, he's talking about his first meeting with the conservator.
Wait is not an exception to hearsay.
I think it is.
Do you have a particular exception you would like me to review?
No.
Okay, sustained, please move on to your next question.
Mr. Nerick, so you never actually met with Russ, you just talked to him on the phone. I'm not asking what he said to him, but you talked to him on the phone.
he was there at the office one day, and I didn't speak with Mr. Dempsey.
Okay. Did Mr. Dempsey ask you to produce anything for him
No.
as the conservator?
No,
Did Mr. Dempsey, was Mr. Dempsey aware of DDW Transportation?
I think in January of 2022.
I'm going to object, Your Honor, calls for speculation. He never met with Mr. Dempsey. How do you know if he was aware of the formation of any
Just said
company?
Mr. Dempsey was in the office.
The
He said he didn't speak
affidavit,
with him.
the affidavit I got that he,
You have to wait for the judge to rule.
oh, okay, sorry.
Again,
This could go really simple if I would just be allowed to ask simple questions.
Your Honor, I would note that the witness seems to be texting on his phone. I don't know if he's communicating with somebody while he's testifying. That's a huge problem. Aside from
I had
rude
somebody
as
call-
well.
Yeah, I know, just like you are.
okay, what is the purpose of this line of questioning, Mr.
The
Lee?
purpose of this line of questioning, Judge, is to find out what he knew and when he knew it.
And why?
Mr. Polderman has alleged that there was diversion of funds from DDW Investments, that there was this creation of a new company, a new bank account, that was all criminal. That Mr. Warner had the intent to violate this court's orders. And this may have all been before this court's orders.
This witness has testified that he has never spoken directly to Mr. Dempsey. So how can he know what, I mean, it's up to you if you want to continue asking him these
I'll
questions.
just move on.
It just doesn't, it's not very helpful.
Okay,
I can tell you that.
all right. Mr. Nerick, at some point, you learned that DDW and Transportation was operating, and at the same time, were you aware that there were expenses being leveled against DDW
I'm going to
investments?
object again, Your Honor. He testified that he had no idea about the payments that were due. He handled invoices
I-
on the back end.
Yeah,
It's fair.
Go ahead.
Did you become aware at some point in time that DDW Transportation was continuing to operate, and at some point in time you were terminated?
I was terminated in January of 2022.
How did you learn you were terminated?
You guys had come back from here and, no, by the way, you got fired.
Okay, and what, if anything, did you do?
Aaron, what's the relevance? I'm still trying to tie this in with the elements of the contempt of court. I don't see the relevance in that question whatsoever.
The relevance is, Judge, if he was terminated by this court order in January, what, if anything, did he do with DDW Transportation or DDW Investments? Or did you just leave?
We're not here on his contempt, we're here on Dale Warner's contempt of court, Your Honor.
I'll get right to my point then.
Thank you.
During and within the course of the time that you worked for DDW Transportation, did Dale Warner or anybody else intend to violate this court's orders?
Objection calls for speculation and hearsay as far as what Dale Warner intended.
Did you know?
Would you like to make a ruling, or are you going to, what, do you?
I'd
want
like the court to
respond?
make a ruling, yeah. I would like the court to allow me to directly examine my witness, and they will have an opportunity to cross-examine on anything they want. That's what open cross-examination is in Michigan.
Well, you've asked him a question that requires him to potentially speculate on what he thought that your client thought. So unless you can show me that he has some particular experience that would allow him to have that information, I would not be inclined to allow the question. If he's overheard some kind of conversation by your client or something, that's one thing. But just to simply ask him if he knows what your client thought seems rather speculative.
Let me ask you this. Mr. Narek, how often would you be with Dale Warner while you were working in DDW Transportation?
It depended on the day. Some days, very much, I did my thing and they did theirs.
Okay, and when you say you did your thing, what would that be?
Keeping the guys running and everything else.
Okay, and what would they do? Who is they and what would they do?
Peggy and Mark did the accounting and whatever else needed to be done. I am good at some things and better at others. And
Based
I did-
upon your day-to-day involvement with Dale Warner, do you believe, based upon your personal observations and conversations, that he did anything illegal, unethical, or intent to violate the court's order?
No,
Why would you think?
everything that they owned was together. Everything they still own is together. That's my opinion.
Okay. Were you involved at all with the sale of DDW Transportation to Laidlaw?
In what regard?
How were you involved?
I had a working relationship with Laidlaw. I've been offered jobs with Laidlaw multiple times, and I knew that if I left, it would leave a large bunch of debt because the guys that drive the trucks, they work for me. Dale and Dee signed their checks, but every one of them guys have stuck with me and worked. Just like they stuck with Dale and Dee working after all that had gone on over the years. But them guys, of every one of them, have stayed there working with me because they believed in me. Dale and Dee signed their checks, but they worked with me.
Are you aware that the assets that were sold were from Cedar Creek Express?
The equipment was in Cedar Creek.
Okay. And do you know whether or not Dale and Dee Warner were both involved in that company?
At the time, Dale was the only one, but they're married, so what's the,
Okay. Do you know what the result of the sale was?
I know there was fairly decent
I'm
numbers.
gonna object unless he knows firsthand, Your Honor.
I'm asking you, Mike.
No, he did not ask what's your firsthand knowledge. Anything else could be hearsay.
Would you like to respond?
No. Mr. Narek, what is your knowledge of the sale?
I think it was written on a cocktail napkin, to be honest with you, to begin with, it was like 2.3 or something like that. You all have paperwork here.
And you know what?
Your Honor, still, my objection stands. It's not, he didn't testify. He saw it written on a napkin when it occurred. He just says, I believe it's on a cocktail napkin. That, once again, that's hearsay unless he states that's what
Was
he's
there when it was written out, so,
Thank you.
Hey, could you scoot up to the microphone a little bit?
sorry, I'm done busy quickly.
That's all right.
Mr. Narek, after the sale of DDW Transportation to Laidlaw, you know what, if anything, happened to the customers that were, as you mentioned earlier, part of DDW transportation?
I talked to them, and there was a couple that we set up the banking and stuff for the new, and we picked up that Monday and went to work.
Okay. What, do you know when that sale occurred?
It was official August 7th, or June 17th, 2022.
June 17th, 2022. And I believe you said you never talked to Mr. Dempsey, right?
No, Mr. Dempsey attempted to contact me. I have it on my phone after I was terminated though.
Okay. So after you were terminated in January of 2022, Mr. Dempsey attempted to call you?
Yes, he texted me. Matter of fact,
What did he text you?
hear me out.
Okay. Did you have any idea what that meant?
No, Mr. Dempsey attempted to bribe me.
What do you mean?
Come along with what we're trying to do here, and we'll make everything that's gone on right with you.
What was wrong with you?
There's just things that went on, work that I was done and wasn't paid for, unpaid wages.
You know, I'm objecting, and the reason is, once again, we have these 5 issues, these 5 elements of the contempt of court, and this does nothing to address any of those.
I'll move on.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet with Mr. Polderman?
Yeah,
And when did you first meet with Mr. Polderman?
June 20th of 2022.
June 20th of 2022.
Yep,
And what was the course of that meeting?
he was there and they had a pickup that I drove and he was there to grab that.
What do you mean grab it?
All right, once again.
Yeah, I don't know how this is relevant to the 5 counts of contempt. They all predate the time period that's being asked. The fact that I was there and seized a truck that Mr. Neary drove is neither here nor there.
I'm asking if he ever met with the current successor conservator's attorney. That was
The
your.
5 issues of contempt predate all of that.
I agree, Mr. Polderman. That's why I'm asking the questions. Mr. Nerick, did you have any dealings with Dale Warner during and within the course of the strike that? Nothing further.
Cross-examination?
Good afternoon, Mr. Neary. My name is John Polderman. I'm the attorney for the successor conservator, Charles Bullock. You testified earlier, right, that you're the division manager for Laidlaw, is that correct?
Yes,
And you also testified that you've been present on site at the business and is that business located at 2170 Munger Road?
yeah,
And have you changed your offices between working for DDW Investments, DDW Transportation, or Laidlaw?
I work on the side of the office that they pay the rent for.
So you stayed in the same spot throughout that
Well,
time?
I moved sides of my desk,
You moved to different sides of your desk, but otherwise you've been in the same room?
more or less, yeah.
Okay. And you testified earlier too that between the transition from DDW Investments to DDW Transportation, you essentially did the same thing, is that correct?
Yeah,
So you dealt with the same customers between DDW Investments and DDW Transportation?
yeah,
And you, other than maybe moving on different sides of your desk, you sat in the same spot and worked at the same spot?
pretty much, yeah.
And you dealt with the same people too, right? Dale Warner was present.
To a point,
And how were things transitioned between DDW Investments and DDW Transportation? Did letters go out?
not really. I had conversations with the customers myself because I was the one that with both companies and actually the transition to Laidlaw that dealt with the customers.
Right, you
I could
testified
have
you
went
were
to work for
critical.
John Tom Trucking and took every customer with me and would have worked for them because they were comfortable with dealing with me.
Right, and you notified the customers, right, that there was someone new that they'd be dealing with as far as where to send their payment? I mean,
Yes.
investments and transportation
And Laidlaw.
and Laidlaw. Did Dale Warner ever speak to you about this transition
Which transition?
between investments and transportation?
Just that Jim Guzma advised him to do something before the IRS came in and started seizing stuff.
Right, so transportation was formed to avoid debt with the IRS, correct?
I don't know that for fact. I know that there were significant issues that when you have a federal tax lien, that it's kind of hard to overcome, especially the amount that was from what,
But that's what you were told.
yeah.
And how about the sale of DDW Transportation that you testified that took place in June of 2022, correct?
Yes.
I'd ask you to put your phone away.
I'm sorry, I have one of my guys that's trying to reach me and,
Too bad. He's gonna have to wait while you're on the stand.
you know,
Please.
no problem.
So in June of 2022, transportation is sold to Laidlaw, correct?
Yep,
And those were the same customers you had been dealing with, right? Whether you had the investments hat on or the transportation hat on. After that, you had the Laidlaw hat on, so to speak, and you were dealing with the same customers?
I myself dealt with them. Dale Warner nor D Warner had a whole lot of contact with any of the customers.
Right. That wasn't what I asked you. I said,
Well,
were you
that
dealing,
means-
listen to my question, please. Did you have the contact with the same customers between
Yes.
investments, transportation, and Laidlaw?
Yep.
And in fact, well, let me back up. Did you review the purchase agreement between DDW
No.
Transportation?
No,
Did you have any part in negotiating that
only thing I negotiated was my salary.
as far as what?
What the hell does what's the salary mean? My salary with Laidlaw, and I had to buy a car of my own to drive, as it wasn't part of my salary.
Right, so you negotiated with the Laidlaw as far as your salary and other benefits.
Yeah,
You testified earlier that DDW Investments still has assets. Is that a
no, I
fair?
didn't.
Okay, then what did you say?
What did I say? You're the genius.
Don't argue with me. Don't do it. I'll ask you again. I'll try it again. What assets do you believe DDW Investments has?
None.
Okay. And what is the basis for your statement?
I've reviewed titles for insurance purposes for DDW Investments over the years to make sure everything was insured properly. There's never been anything titled in DDW Investments other than the pickup that you guys.
How about some trailers?
The trailers, I don't,
If you know.
no, there's none. Trailers are Cedar Creek.
How about the office equipment was there? You said you basically sat at the same spot. So was there ever a bill of sale or anything transferring the computers and equipment and things like that between investments and transportation and eventually Laidlaw?
I know between the investments and transportation, I have no knowledge of. Laidlaw provided me with a computer, a printer, and even a nice chair to sit in.
How about a desk?
The desk is the same old desk.
Is there anyone currently assisting you?
No. I have, as far as in my capacity with Laidlaw,
Correct.
what do you mean by, what are you looking for?
Who else is employed?
Just the drivers.
Just the drivers. Do any of Dale's children help out at the farm?
Jaron helps him, his son and his daughters help with various things.
How about in the gap period, so roughly between April of 2021 to, let's say, April of 2022, who helped with services at the farm?
Services as far as,
Booking drivers, paying bills, doing administrative things.
drivers, I handled everything.
Were Dale's children around then as well?
Yeah,
And what did they do?
is that really, hey, they did the invoicing and that's
So they would help with some of the invoicing as
some
far
of the
as
office work.
okay.
I'm not sure what they did every minute of the day. I'm kind of busy myself.
Would they report to you?
No,
Who would they report to?
they worked for their dad. When they did the invoicing, I reviewed it and that's it.
Did you have any knowledge as far as setting up of bank accounts?
No,
Have you ever had signing authority on any bank account?
no,
Were you aware of the SBA loan to Warag? I'm sorry, Warag Farms.
after the fact, I heard about it.
And who did you hear about it from?
I heard Mark had secured some financing after they had lost their financing with AgriFund.
Were you part of that process at all?
With what?
With the AgriFund and the refinance with SBA?
All I knew is that we had to haul a bunch of grain in to pay off the note to AgriFund because the note was called.
And was that, for those conversations between Dale and Mark?
They just told me that they had to haul grain in because the note was called.
Your Honor, I don't believe I have anything further.
Mr. McFarland?
Nothing.
Ms. Heiss?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Berger?
Nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, but I have another matter that I would like to discuss after you excuse Mr. Nemrick.
Any objection to him being excused?
No.
No.
I can leave.
No objection.
Yes, you may. Thank you for your
Can I
testimony.
give you this?
No, sorry.
Okay, I'll mail it to you. Thank you.
Careful. Thanks.
That would hurt.
Any other witnesses? Mr. Lee?
No, Your Honor, but I would like to move again to have admitted what I call as Exhibit 1 to the operating agreements under the authentication rule. I believe that that covers them in terms of a hearsay objection.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
901 authentication rule.
And what is it that you wish to present for purposes of authentication?
The two documents, the operating agreements that I wanted to bring under the business records rule, but now I'd like them under authentication under 901.
Judge, it's not accepted hearsay. It might fix the issues that Mr. McFarland had as to the question of authentication or originality. It doesn't cure the fact that it's still an out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
It's a business record kept in the ordinary course of business.
And the person who testifies in relation to a business record has to have firsthand knowledge. Generally, they're the records keeper, they're the person that creates the document at the time that at or close to the time that it happens.
Right, Mr. Back testified that he was aware of the documents.
He testified he was not aware of the documents and he did not create them.
Right, you specifically testified you'd never even seen one of them before.
Okay, do you have a response to that, Mr. Lee?
No, Judge. I mean, I just thought that it applied and I'd like to support the ruling.
Authentication, this is 901 addresses the requirement of authentication or identification.
Waives the issue of authentication. For
Do you
record.
have a copy of the rule in front of you? I'm literally reading it. It says requirement of authentication or identification. 901, general provision, A, the requirement of authentication or identification as a condition precedent to admissibility is satisfied by evidence sufficient to support a finding that the matter in question is what its proponent claims. Illustrations, and these are examples of how, or in some instances, by evidence that has been considered sufficient to support the finding that a court could make, that the matter in question is what it is claimed to be. The first way to do that would be through testimony, which we've already determined as of this point is not sufficient. Non-expert opinion on handwriting doesn't apply. Comparison by trier or expert witness. I don't have anything to compare it with. Distinctive characteristics haven't been presented. There's no call for voice identification, telephone conversations, public records or reports. This indicates evidence that a writing authorized by law to be recorded or filed, and in fact recorded or filed in a public office or a purported public record, report, statement, or data compilation is from the public office where items of this nature are kept. If you have some information on that point, I'd be happy to look at that. It's certainly not an ancient document. It's not a process or system, and I haven't been offered any other method provided by statute or rule.
Okay. That's what I have, Judge.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to deny the request to take that into evidence then.
My understanding is that Mr. Duzma may be available for testimony. I presented some affidavits, but he may be available. And then to call him in about 5 minutes, if the court would be so inclined. Hear his testimony.
All right, he will be able to be available by Zoom, I'm assuming.
I guess. My understanding was he was trial, but he may be available.
I can give you a few minutes to determine that. We have approximately an hour left for today if we get to 3:30. So I can give you a 5-minute recess